Alright, good morning guys. We're going to make a holster today. And I was contacted by a customer who asked me if I'd ever distressed holsters. And I said I hadn't, but I could imagine a few things that might do it, like a wire brush. So I started looking it up and trying out a few things, and it turns out you can use alcohol to kind of dissolve the upper level, the top finish on leather. And so we're going to try something here today. He sent me a picture of a holster that a customer had bought from me, and then the customer oiled it, and it was a nice dark brown. I don't know if it stayed that way, but that is what he liked. The dark brown, and then usually what happens with the Crazy Horse leather is wherever it bends, you get a little bit of oil migration away from the bend, and it creates a lighter highlight there, if you will. So we're going to try to replicate a little bit of that. We're going to try to get it quite a bit darker than what this Crazy Horse leather is right now. So my plan for that is, for the dark color, I'm going to use a little bit of neat's foot oil, and I'm going to use some dark brown antiquing paste, antique finish from Thievings. I get that from Weaver. And then for the lighter highlights, so that's going to create, the oil will naturally create the dark and the light, right? But I don't think the oil will keep it dark. It's going to eventually dry out. Oil will last for a couple days, maybe 24 hours or so, and it kind of tends to dry out, and the leather turns light again. So we're going to use the antiquing finish to get the dark effect, and wherever we want it light, I'm going to use the alcohol, see if we can break down the top finish a little bit. Then I might use some sandpaper and take some of that top finish out so we get the lighter look underneath, because this is for a 1947 Colt Official Police, and we're going to try to make an old looking holster to go with that gun. Alright, let's go ahead and get started here. So this is my alcohol. Now what we're going to try to do is wherever the leather bends or would naturally get worn off, that's where we're going to try to take off the top coat and simulate that highlight underneath. So obviously that's going to be at the spine, top edge of the holster. That gets bent there, and it gets more wear because stuff tends to hit your holster right there, right? So we're going to try to create a bit of a highlight there. I've never done this before, actually. Usually I make stuff and I try to make it look new, not old. And some people might call this something else, I don't know. I'm going to call it distressing. Some people might call it antiquing. Some people might call it aging. And some people would probably argue that there's a difference between all three of those. So I don't know what I'm doing, technically, but I do think I can make something that'll look nice. So we're going to put a little bit there, a little bit here. And this is the snap strap that goes across the top. And again, at the point where it bends over here, that's where you're going to get a little bit of wear naturally over the years, right? So we're going to simulate that by taking off the edge a little bit and scraping it down parallel to the top finish. I'm going to put some alcohol there and let that eat away at that. Same way with the buckle strap. This thing's going to come through here, like that. So right there is a point where it would get worn away, so we're going to mark that. And then the other spot, let's see, so this is going to be in here like this. So we're going to do in here as well. That's the points where it bends and would stick out and would get worn off naturally. All right, like I said, I've never done this before, so I don't know how much it takes. You can see it definitely is eating away a little bit there, but we could use a little more. Simulate a little wear there. Tip. All right, I think that does it for that. Let's go ahead and see if we can go through that finish a little bit. This 100 grit sandpaper. You know, it goes against my grain, to make a leather worker's pun, to ruin the finish on a nice piece of leather. Although I do not think that structurally we're going to affect anything. It's not going to compromise the integrity of the holster. How long it'll last, it'll be perfectly fine. Quite getting the light. Alright, so we're going to go ahead with some antiquing finish here. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to avoid the spots that I scraped off, and that will make those spots stay light. And where I put it on, it will be a little bit darker. So the way this stuff goes on is you put it on fairly plentifully, you just rub it around. It's a paste, and then it needs to dry. And once it's dried, you can actually polish it, you can buff it into a fairly smooth finish. So I'm probably going to accelerate the drying process with a heat gun. Alright, you can see there are a couple little spots, little clumps of that antiquing paste, and I know from experience that if that's not smeared out and dried up, it just won't buff, it will not polish. So now, I'm just gonna get a smooth finish on this. Alright, I'm going to take my sandpaper and try to make these edges look a little more realistic here. And I'm wondering now if this strip of light leather, if that portion is just a little too wide. Maybe not. We'll go with that, I think. This will touch up a bit. Touch up a bit. This tip touch up a bit. I really think if anyone is watching this in order to learn how to do this, I really think you could take the antiquing paste and go over everything, and then take sandpaper and scrape off the antiquing paste just wherever you want your effect to come through. Because I'm seeing that right now here on the tip, it sands right off. And then I said earlier I was going to use oil. I'm not sure that I will now. I think I've got my dark effect. But what I will do probably is go over everything with leather balm. And that's going to kind of put a protective finish on the parts that I've scraped off, just so they're not as susceptible to rain or weather or whatever, if the guy's outside with the holster and stuff. You could also use, I know some people use Resolene. We used to use Resolene on halters years ago. I'm not a fan of Resolene really. It just tends to be sticky in my opinion. This stuff I really like because you can really buff it once it's dried. You can buff it. It's got that carnauba wax in it. The other product I did use before that is called Leather Sheen, also by Phoebings. Works similarly. This stuff smells better and is a little waxier, and I think it just comes out a little smoother. All right, I think we've got a pretty good effect there. I'm wondering if I want to go along the edges with my dark. So I'm feeling the grain where it was cut. I think I do want to match my dark and my light on the edges. So I'm going to go along there with that. I'm just going to try to match Wherever I have dark on the top, I'm going to put dark on the edge. Just a little bit more. Trying to get here is a simulation of it having worn off over years of use. Alright, good on that. Alright, so this was my test piece. You can see this is a little bit darker than this, and that's because I applied the leather balm to it. But the whole thing, I think, has just a nice protective waxy finish to where the paste doesn't rub off on you and where the weather protects this distressed portion a little bit from the weather. So, alright, let's go ahead and I'm going to buff up these edges a little bit where I applied the antiquing finish. That dust away so you don't get it on your finishes. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and apply some of this balm to finish it off. Actually, I usually mix it with a little bit of water, dilutes the effect a little bit, which is what I have in this small brown container. And also, if you spill it, you don't spill your whole bottle. Don't ask me how I know. Okay, I'm going to use a dauber on the edge. I'm going to go over everything with this. And I apply it on the edge with the dauber, and then I'll apply it on the top with a cloth. All right, so I just sandpapered again, even after applying and buffing my leather balm. And the reason I did that, I thought the leather balm just made it a little bit too dark, and I think the customer does want a little bit of a lighter highlight there. And I think that looks okay. I took the sandpaper and just added some even lighter highlights, so now you've almost got a three-tone gradient. You go from dark to light brown to really light brown. So hopefully he's happy with that. And of course, now you say, well, that's got no protective finish on there. I really think that's fine. I don't think that's going to be a problem. You know, if that was ever a problem, all you would need to do is put on a little bit of oil or something there. But it's unlikely that this holster gets repeatedly wet and then dried, and that's really the enemy of leather, is if it gets wet and then dry and wet and dries and so on and so forth. Like if you were, if you have a harness on a horse, for example, and you use it once a week or 3 or 4 times a week, and it gets wet a couple times, and then it dries back out, and then it gets wet again. After a couple years, that's what's going to break down your leather. But with this, I really don't think that's going to be the case. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rivet the buckle on this strap that goes around the cylinder, and I'm going to rivet this strap in place through this slot. I'm going to put the snaps here and here to hold the gun in place, so that can snap together, and then I'm going to head to the sewing machine and stitch together, and we'll wrap this project up. All right, so here we've got our straps in place. There's the snap strap fastened to the slot, riveted, and we've got our buckle strap, and that buckle's riveted on there.